It's time for this week's second edition of Political Breakfast. This time we hone in on the role of women voters in Georgia. A recent Gallup analysis found that women aged 18 to 29 are more liberal than young women in the past on specific issues, particularly abortion. And Vice President Kamala Harris is bringing her campaign back to Atlanta this Friday to focus on abortion rights in Georgia. That's in wake of reporting by ProPublica published earlier this week that found 2 Georgia women died after they could not access timely medical care and legal abortions. Harris has also recently doubled down on GOP candidate Donald Trump's running mate, JD Vance, and his past comments about how the Democratic Party is being controlled by so-called cat ladies.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC.
How will all this continue to impact this powerful voting bloc? Republican strategist Brian Robinson, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson, and host Lisa Rayam discuss. We start with Brian.
Now, I saw a statistic over the weekend that women have been the majority of the electorate for many decades. Yeah. And that's definitely true here on the local level in Georgia. But that was really kind of before we had women at the top of the ticket. That has widened that gap a little bit, and we're particularly seeing it here. But at the same time, as you see women beginning to break toward Harris, you see more men breaking toward Trump. At the end of the day, there's slightly more weight on the women's side than there is on the men's side, just because there's more of them. So I don't think any strategy that would take them for granted. I don't think Republicans are taking them for granted. I think one thing that Democrats sometimes make the mistake of is assuming that all women see quote-unquote women's issues the way Democrats see quote-unquote women's issues. We see these man on the street interviews, or in this case, women on the street interviews, and they are hardcore Trump supporters.
But then you have these cat lady comments, and then you have I hate Taylor Swift, and I mean that's a turnoff, I think.
Well, let me tell you what's missing here. You don't see the role of the spouses as much in the Republican candidates' campaign. And I think you would agree with me, Brian, that you're right. We can't take it for granted that every single woman is going to align with the Democratic platform. But polling has shown that Democrats do a better job with independent and moderate women. And the fact that Kamala Harris is there and she talks about women's issue in a way that neither JD Vance or Trump can talk about it. We can't assume as Democrats that every single woman will be pro-choice. We can't assume that every woman in this country knows how it is to be a mother. But I will tell you this. I do think that if the Trump-Vance campaign continues to say the things that they're saying about women, then I do think that that's going to have an effect on the turnout. It's really going to matter in those key battleground states, because I think that with the women voters I talked to, Lisa, are very concerned about the economy. Mm-hmm. They're very concerned about their children's safety. And they're also very concerned about their reproductive rights. Even though they may be pro-life, they still want government to basically be able to give opportunities to women who need the assistance. And so, we can have a robust conversation about Roe v. Wade and whether they're pro-choice, but I do think that the majority of the women that I talk to who are Republicans definitely are feeling better about what they're hearing from Harris, and she's doing much better as a candidate for president than they thought she would be.
Can I just say, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much about the cat ladies, because, that's not the language that we need to be using. I think there was a little bit of spectacle involved with that because he was on the Tucker Carlson show on Fox News. Right. And so there's a bit of shock value that kind of comes along with that platform. But the underlying issue that he's talking about is one that we as Americans have to begin to talk about, which is about population decline and demographic collapse. It's a real thing. And it is a product of people, of numerous things. Some of it is not everybody wants to be a parent, right? I didn't have to have kids. That was never my burning ambition. And I know a lot of women and men who feel the exact same way. And that is playing out. And it's got to do with the price of housing. It's got to do with the price of educating and raising a child.
Education.
All of those things are huge, right?
How many people we know, friends, family, folks who either cannot because of mother nature, reproductive issues, fertility issues, they have to go out the IVF route. They can't have children. And even when they do that, they still, and some people have fertility issues. But then there's also the folks wants to basically wait until they find the right person to have the children with, right? And then they have to make that decision to say, okay, I'm there. There are people out here that's trying to conceive children that can't. And then there's some that have actually had miscarriages, right? I mean, how many women do we know that's had 2 and 3? No. But I think where you see the folks coming out against Vance is that he's saying exactly kind of what you're saying, that they're part of the problem with this country, and they're not. But because they speak up and they speak out, and they may disagree with him, that he should never have said, hey, they're just childless cat ladies, so therefore I'm just going to disregard their opinion. And I think that there's a lot of voters out there that are pushing back on him because it's a domino effect.
Right. I think that's all fair, and I do want to say that JD Vance has very explicitly said, I am not referring to those friends, those family members that we all know who have been through such pain and such turmoil, that this is not about them. And I think I agree with you. He made a mistake by saying that phrase, by diminishing the choices of many Americans, one of which could have been me, right? I mean, obviously I can't be a woman. I'm not going to be a childless cat woman, but I could have been a childless dog man for sure. And so I understand all that, but he's been very clear it's not about those who can't have children on their own. And we do have to figure out what we're going to do about population replacement. There's a lot of angst in this country. This Haitian immigrant thing in Springfield, Ohio, is we allow a lot of immigration from around the world to supply a workforce. And we have to do it to supply a workforce because Americans aren't reproducing at a replacement rate. So we wouldn't be growing on our own. So immigration is what is keeping our nation growing. And this is something like if you have a problem with mass immigration, you think it's too much cultural change at one time, the way you do it is you have more babies. And like I said, I have one kid. I'm part of this issue, so I'm not condemning anybody for it. But we as a society do need to have a serious, non-hurtful, non-offensive, non-finger-pointing conversation about what we're going to do moving forward, because it's important for the country.
You are listening to Republican strategist Brian Robinson, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson, and host Lisa Rayam on the latest version of Political Breakfast.